Canada has still not put in the public domain any evidence to back up its charge of linking India to the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nijjar, but source-based leaks in the Canadian media have begun. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. We continue to keep a close eye on the diplomatic ramifications of Justin Trudeau's astonishing charge, one that has unleashed basically institutional Western hypocrisy, according to an overwhelming number of Indians. No matter which way you vote, there seems to be a unanimity in India on the fact that Trudeau has not just shown immaturity, he has also endangered the relationship. He's, of course, always practiced a dangerous brand of politics, flirting openly and brazenly, and sometimes more than flirting, with Khalistani groups and Khalistani terrorists. The killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar has caused a virtual diplomatic crisis, one with geopolitical ramifications. Trudeau, speaking on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, has repeated his charge but still not placed any evidence in the public domain. Canadian media, or sections of it, however, are quoting unnamed sources to argue that human and signals intelligence is available, basically that Indian diplomats had been under surveillance. They're also claiming that India has not really rejected these charges when, quote-unquote, pressed behind closed doors. How is this all going to unfold? India has taken a very strong stand. New visas have been suspended. India has dismissed these allegations as absolutely absurd and called Canada a safe haven for terrorists. Let's introduce our guests on the program today from different cities of the world as we continue to look at the geopolitical ramifications of this big story. Joining us from the United Kingdom today is Avinash Paliwal. He's one of the country's best-known security affairs and strategic analysts. He is a reader in international relations based out of the United Kingdom. It's good to see you, Avinash. Also joining us is Rupa Subramanya. She is the host of the Rupa Subramanya Show, based out of Canada at True North, and also a writer at the Free Press. Good to see you, Rupa. Also joining us is veteran diplomat, Ambassador Manjeev Puri. It's good to have you back with us, who spent years of his professional life basically looking at the question, the intractable sort of question of Canada and its patronage of Khalistani groups. It's good to see you, sir. And also joining us is strategic affairs analyst Michael Kugelman, who is, of course, at the Wilson Center. Thank you very much, all of you. I just want to bring in Ambassador Puri for first comments. We'll play out those clips of Justice Trudeau, but he's basically repeated his charges, choosing instead to fight his battles through sections of the Canadian media. How do you think India would respond? I mean, India officially is not going to respond to source-based articles in Canadian newspapers.
Thank you, Barkha. Look, I think the Indian response and its direction has become clear since yesterday. We have rejected what he has said. We've also called them absurd. And frankly speaking, we've also taken steps from our side, including this business of telling them in no uncertain terms that as long as our diplomats are not secure and protected, there will be parity. You will reduce your number of diplomats here, and we will not be able to provide the service which I believe thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Canadians would really like, which is visa services. So I think the ante has been upped, and in fact, Mr. Trudeau may or may not have anticipated this, but I can't see the Indian government, let me say, taking these things lying down.
When you say that the Indian government will not take them lying down, what more do you think India might do?
Barkha, I don't know what are the menu of options and what else is happening in the background. But I do believe that, on all of these particular things, there is a degree of do it immediately, which was expulsion of diplomats, a quick bit of calibration, something else. But there are so many other aspects of stuff that can be done. Let me say, scuppering communications, economics, trade, and all these things are possible. I don't think all of that is happening. But at the moment, with India having suspended the visa services, in a sense, the ball has been lobbed quite strongly into the Canadian court.
And that's exactly the point. What will Trudeau do next? Before I take that question to Rupa, I want to just play out a little clip. Trudeau was asked many questions. He kept giving boilerplate responses on the evidence that he has. He kept calling on India to cooperate with him in this investigation, a statement that I think Indians don't even understand. Listen in to a small clip of Trudeau's comments on the sidelines of the UNGA.
Règles de droit. As I said on Monday, there are credible reasons to believe that agents of the government of India were involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil. That is something of the utmost and foundational importance in a country of rule of law, in a world where international rules-based order matters. We have a rigorous and independent justice system and robust processes that will follow their course. And we call upon the government of India to engage with us to move forward on getting to the truth of this matter.
Hello, Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray with Global News. So far, none of the US, UK, Australia, or New Zealand have echoed the allegations about India. We know you gave a heads up to some of those world leaders. Did you ask them to publicly condemn New?
Yeah, well, that remains a big question. Were they asked to publicly condemn what has happened? There are conflicting reports that we get on that. Rupa, let me take that question to you. What are Trudeau's options at this point?
Well, think he's going to continue to double down on these allegations. And as you noted, that there are going to be these leaks to the media. We saw one such leak made to the CBC. It's a state-funded media here in Canada, suggesting that it was, or making the claim that one of the Five Eyes had actually provided Trudeau with the intelligence, and they have significant intelligence on India's role in the killing of this individual. What is interesting to me, Barkha, so far is that while Trudeau at this point seems isolated on the world stage, no one's really, none of the major countries have really come out and, except there's been a slight shift in tone in what the U.S. said just yesterday. I've not seen any prominent senior cabinet member, apart from the foreign minister Melanie Joly and former defense minister Harjit Sajjan, to back up these claims. The current deputy prime minister Chrystia Freeland, who was also the former foreign minister, has remained silent, and so have other senior members of the cabinet. So I'm not quite sure what is going on here. There's been a lot of criticism of Trudeau here in Canada itself, where people have said, well, if these allegations are indeed true, and this is something similar to what I've been saying, there's a way of going about doing this. You don't go after an important ally, a rising economic giant, a counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific region. You don't treat an ally like a tin pot dictatorship like North Korea, and that's exactly what has happened here.
Yeah. And can I ask you, I think what's especially galling to Indians is that there is no or very little commentary in the Western media on the Khalistan issue. There's no effort to locate Nijjar within his antecedents. I saw today a newspaper calling him a sort of community man who used to serve food at his Gurdwara. There is a kind of romanticization of Nijjar. Are large sections of the Canadian people not aware of the Khalistan issue? Do they prefer amnesia? Have they all forgotten the Kanishka bombing? What's going on here?
I've had to remind people over the last few days, and it's been extremely frustrating for me to remind people that the worst act of terrorism in Canadian history, and this is not according to me, this is according to the Public Safety of Canada. It's an official statement from the Public Safety of Canada. It was the Air India bombing. And many Canadians are actually quite oblivious to that. They don't even know that. And it's unfortunate. I mean, my sense is that we in Canada have normalized Khalistan separatism. Look, I'm all for free speech. It's you say stuff about you support Khalistan. That's protected free speech by all means. But I think when it comes down to funding separatism in another country, when it comes to trying to destabilize another country, that too an ally, I think that's where things get a little murky for me, and this is where a lot of Canadians just don't seem to get the importance of it. I mean, they don't, it's worth repeating, the Air India bombing was the worst act of terrorism in Canada's history, with mostly Canadians who died in that bombing.
Yeah, before I come to Avinash and Michael, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, we've been talking about Kanishka, and I think, if I'm not wrong, 333 people dead. A majority of them were Canadian citizens. Only one man was ever convicted, and he was released after serving only 2/3 of a paltry 9-year sentence. And that happened, coincidentally or not, shortly after Trudeau became Prime Minister in 2015. I think it happened in 2016. This amnesia in the West on Kanishka. I mean, imagine if people forgot 9/11.
Barkha, you're absolutely right. But the fact is that that's how societies, especially societies which take for granted that they are the societies who know everything, react. How many years and how many decades has India been facing terrorism till 9/11 came about and it became a word in the world, which was an outlawed word? So, this is the nature of the game. I'm afraid, we have to be part of it. I mentioned on your show yesterday that my entire career saw this because I joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1982. Kanishka happened in 1983. And one has seen this downs in terms of relationship with Canada, a reason for which every reason for a good potential high relationship existed. But the Khalistani issue and some other issues have always bedeviled this. Now, I was ambassador to the European Union, and I went to Ireland and saw the memorial at Cork. I mean, how many people really, pay attention to it? Human memories are short, and if things haven't happened in the part of the world which thinks that they are the only part of the world that matters, that's how things happen. It's not very good. But
I can't wrap my head around the fact that it was Trudeau's father who had an opportunity to extradite Parmar, who eventually masterminds this bombing, and he refuses. And in India, a lot of people are going like father, like son. But Avinash has argued in his op-ed in the Hindustan Times that this is no longer an India-Canada bilateral issue. And sure enough, Trudeau is on the sort of speed dial to the Five Eyes, to his colleagues in this intelligence sharing group. And before I come to Avinash and Michael, we had this statement from Jake Sullivan overnight. Listen it.
As we heard from the Canadian Prime Minister publicly about the allegations, we went out publicly ourselves and expressed our deep concern about them, our support for a law enforcement process to get to the bottom of exactly what happened and to ensure that the perpetrators are held accountable. I'm not going to get into the substance of private diplomatic conversations, but we are in constant contact with our Canadian counterparts. We are consulting with them closely. We support the efforts that they are undertaking in this investigation, and we have also been in touch with the Indian government as well. And I will leave it at that for today, only to say that I have seen in the press some efforts to try to drive a wedge between the United States and Canada on this issue, and I firmly reject the idea that there is a wedge between the U.S. and Canada. We have deep concerns about the allegations, and we would like to see this investigation carried forward and the perpetrators held to account. That is what the United States has stood for from the moment this emerged in public, and we will continue to stand for that until this fully plays its way.
Avinash, how do you read those comments? Those comments have been interpreted in both ways, two ways, depending on your already pre-existing point of view on this issue. One, to say, oh, America's taking it very seriously. They're not going to give India a free pass on this, quote unquote. Another, these are general statements. We are seriously concerned. We want the investigation to go through. In fact, there's reason to believe that all of these countries were aware of what Trudeau was planning to say well before the G20. I even hear from some officials that he was told, you will not open your mouth about this till after the G20 because we can't have the G20 derailed. So we're picking up some of that. But how do you read Sullivan's latest statement?
Barkha, thanks for having me on this show. I think Trudeau wanted to create a fait accompli for both his own government, for the opponents within Canada, who have been pressing him quite strongly against and real foreign interference. I mean, in this case, by China previously. So, but also his treaty allies in the Five Eyes, right? He knows he cannot unilaterally pressure the government of India. The power asymmetries are huge in that bilateral context. But if you rope in the Five Eyes allies, you're basically saying that, look, there is a tension between the treaty alliance which exists between these countries and the temporary geopolitical kind of alignment that all these countries are in with India to counter China. So he's basically pitching, he's basically trying to exploit these tensions to his own advantage. And there is a reason why Jake Sullivan went ahead and clarified that the United States is quite committed to the alliance, because that's the signal that is coming from Trudeau. And that's also and he also kind of tried to balance the relationship with India. So this is the signal that I see. Trudeau has put all his allies in a very uncomfortable position vis-a-vis India. It's a very unique sort of a moment where you're not dealing with an adversary like China, where there is unity of thought and action. You're dealing with a very important strategic partner, and none of the countries would want to see a dislocation in ties with India. But I do feel, whether it's for his domestic political purpose or larger strategic purpose, Trudeau did feel cornered enough to take such a decisive kind of action in making this whole
cornered
thing.
by whom? Cornered by whom or what?
I think cornered both domestically and internationally. He was cornered by his opponents back home at a moment of declining popularity by forcing his hand to do something about foreign interference. And this is a very touchy issue, not just in Canada, but also in countries like United Kingdom, countries like United States, which feel that their domestic political systems are under some sort of an assault by authoritarian regimes like Russia and China. We know the election interference in 2016 by the Russian cyber bot. So that's a broader context. And internationally, when you have your allies tell you during the G20 summit in Delhi that do not go ahead and make it public at this point in time, you also feel slighted that your allies, treaty allies, are not siding with you on something which is so foundational to the alliance system itself. You cannot have rule of law if, in their perspective, you're not protecting your own citizens. Now, I completely agree. Indians see it as hypocrisy, and it is hypocritical. But that would not change the political calculus moving forward. This is, we are looking at escalation from both sides. Ambassador Puri is correct. This will escalate before it de-escalates. And as a scholar of security studies, I'm getting this distinct feeling that at this point, both sides want backstage de-escalation, and signaling is very strong with some sort of mediation by powerful countries like the United States.
Interesting. Michael, would you agree with that there will be an attempt, in particular by the United States, that invested a lot on that Biden trip to India? There's an invitation back to him to come back as the chief guest on the Republic Day parade. They cannot let this relationship go further south. That said, some of the complaints that India has been making and making it through diplomatic channels again and again and again and again are about the patronage of Khalistani groups. It's like there are two parallel universes looking at the same story. We in India just don't see any Western media commentary other than those of us Indians who are writing in the Western press on this issue. There is a kind of conflating of the Sikh community with the Khalistanis, despite may I just say, a recent Pew survey that actually tells you that 95% of Sikhs in India identify proudly, 93 as residents of Punjab and 95% proudly as Indians. And I don't know where the Western media is on this story, but Michael, you saw the Sullivan comments as more significant. Go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me back. I would argue that to this point, the public response from the U.S. and the other Five Eyes allies of Canada has actually been remarkably restrained. I mean, we're talking about Canada, a very close treaty ally of the United States, making this explosive allegation about a state-sponsored assassination next door to the U.S. And yet the response from Washington and the other Five Eyes allies has essentially been to signify concern about the allegations. Now, indeed, Sullivan did go a bit further yesterday when he said that no one gets an exemption on this issue, meaning that the U.S. government will take seriously these allegations even if they apply to India, a close partner of the U.S. That's how I interpreted what he said. My sense is that, yes, as I believe was said just before, that mediation would be a very desirable step for the U.S. government to try to take. It doesn't want to have to be in this position of figuring out how to position itself in this crisis with two close friends that also happen to be very close friends of the United States. The best way to deal with that is to ease the crisis. But I think the temperatures are too high for there to be any type of de-escalation in the immediate term. But perhaps, as a start, at the least, U.S. officials could try to to encourage the Canadians and the Indians, at the least, to reconsider any type of further escalatory measures. Again, it may be too soon that now, but no, clearly the United States is very concerned about this. But because India is the one being accused, it has been remarkably cautious. I mean, let's be very clear. There is no doubt, no one taken seriously in Washington, regardless of Democrat, Republican, whatever the case. No one wants to see the relationship with India take a hit. That's very clear. But again, we're talking about a situation of Canada, a close ally, accusing India of doing something very serious just next door to the United States. And certainly the US would side with Canada on the issue of the sovereignty and the territorial integrity issue, because that's at the heart of the matter here. I think that's what this really comes down to, that no country, or very few countries, I would assume, would welcome any type of action by another state that could be perceived as a violation of territorial integrity.
But Michael, if you've been, not to say that this is what India did, but I'm sure you've been following the commentary in India, questioning Israel, the United States of America, bringing up examples of Qasem Soleimani, Baghdadi, Osama bin Laden. The list of examples is endless, where indeed extraterritorial hits and kills and eliminations have been done. So I mean, how do we forget that? How does the West get to pontificate? I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, how does the West get to pontificate to India on it?
No, my response here is very brief. You're right. It is hypocritical. And indeed, the more the U.S. pursues this, so-called values-based foreign policy, where it wants to push democracy and rights, the more it's going to subject itself to these very credible accusations. Not to use a phrase that we've heard a lot in recent days. It's true. Yes, the U.S. is hypocritical, but this is always the case. The U.S. is always accused of hypocrisy because it is hypocritical, and to say that the United States should not express concern about an allegation that Canada made just because the U.S. itself has arrogated to itself the right to make assessments, to carry out its own assassinations. I don't think that really fits. I mean, countries are going to function based on their interests, but I would agree that I think in an ideal world, the U.S. would rein in the the democracy promotion talk and so on. But that's just a reality of the times.
Yeah, but it's a reality, I think, that's beginning to be challenged somewhat around the world, which is the limited point that I'm making. Rupa, here's the million-dollar question. Why did Trudeau go public? We now know, or we believe, that he may have wanted to go public even earlier. The fact is that even if you go back to his 2018 visit to India, it was a debacle. You had a certain Mr. Atwal being invited to do official functions, who was convicted for an attempted murder of an Indian cabinet minister. They had to apologize for that. You've had Trudeau attending Khalsa parades, events where Bhindranwale's images have been eulogized. We've had the 2018 report on the terrorism threat to Canada remove all mention of Khalistani extremism in its updated version. Trudeau has been pandering and more than pandering to these extreme elements. Why did he go public? Is it because he's declining in popularity? He thought this would shore it up. Is he under threat from his allies, Jagmeet Singh and company? Why did he do this?
Well, so why did he do this? He apparently, according to a journalist at the Globe and Mail, Canada's national newspaper of record, claimed that that the Globe and Mail had a scoop on the story, and the government had actually requested the Globe and Mail to hold off on the story for a few days longer. And the Globe and Mail said, "Well, we will only give you till Tuesday," and so Trudeau thought that he would preempt this scoop, and so that's one explanation for why he did what he did. The other explanation is that, and it's hard not to come to this conclusion, he's been tanking in the polls recently. He's been hammered at the polls, and the opposition leader has been relentless in going after him. His popularity has really nosedived in a way not seen before. So he's really, in a sense, I would say, fighting for his political survival here in Canada. There's some dissent as well within his party that has come to the surface in recent weeks. So, there are multiple reasons why he's done this. And, it's still perplexing why you would go after a major rising power like India in this manner, most people who are criticizing Trudeau, will also are not outrightly dismissing the allegation, that India may have been behind this, but where's the proof? And you go about making these allegations in the House of Commons on the opening day of Parliament, where you're protected by parliamentary privilege. This is just not the way things are done.
Is this going to shore up his popularity, though? I was just looking at the numbers that my producers were sharing with me. Trudeau's popularity at 31%. His rival, who's actually asked for more facts, is at 40%. And those are the numbers we're seeing. But we're also seeing the NDP at 22%. And this is a guy who's now threatening to hold Prime Minister Narendra Modi personally accountable for what's happened. Very inflammatory tweets. Is that the pressure point that Trudeau's actually acted under?
It could be, very, very well could be, but I think Trudeau is the star of his own show. He always has been, and a lot of this is driven by the fact that he's tanking in the polls. It's a convenient distraction from inflation, from the housing crisis, from our immigration problems. So I mean, it is, and that is what has happened, really. That is what has happened, that the conversation has shifted also from he was supposed to hold an inquiry into the Chinese government's interference in Canada's elections. That's not gone anywhere, and that's been mired in controversy. So there's a whole bunch of different things going on here, and all of them perhaps distracting from the issue at hand.
Yeah. So let's look ahead. What's the geopolitical play? Avinash, do you also agree with the whole sort of mediation thing? What form and shape might that take, and why would the Indians go along? Because they've played, the Indian government has played a hand, which is an aggressive hand. You need something to come back from this. Trudeau needs it. If he goes ahead and he places whatever purported evidence in the public domain, it's going to escalate things. If he doesn't do it, he's going to look like a fool at home. For the government here, they've now sort of gone for the jugular. They can't suddenly act soft. How does this sort of backpedaling happen, if at all?
I think this is a very, as was said earlier, the temperature is very high at this point in time, and it's very difficult to foresee which pathway de-escalation actually takes, especially in the public. I think back channel, I see much more promise, Barkha, in which, the leak to CBC is very, as an intelligence studies scholar, I would say it's a very important signal being sent that, look, if you escalate this further, as you have done till now, then you might have leaks of the audio that we are promising that we have in public, and that would create huge reputational costs for India. Look, I know India is a very important partner for all these countries, but questions have started becoming, people are asking questions now. In London, at least, people have started asking questions. What just happened? How could...
I think we lost Avinash there. So let me actually take the same question to Michael before I come back to Ambassador Puri on this idea of mediation. Michael, do you want to just carry on that point?
I would agree with where I think Avinash was going. It's very difficult at this moment in time, with tensions so high, to try to bring mediation into play. And it's clear that in many cases, when India has faced internal or bilateral crises or disputes, whether it's Kashmir or other things, it does not welcome any type of third-party mediation. But I think that there could be opportunities as early as now and into the next week. As you know, the UNGA meetings are taking place in New York, and we have senior Canadian and Indian and U.S. Officials that are there. So there could be some opportunities for some discussions on the sidelines. Again, back channels, as the term that Avinash used. So there could be some opportunities. But again, I just think at this point, the way this crisis, the dynamics of this crisis right now appear to be much too escalatory to think that any type of external mediation at this point in time is in a position to slow things down. But as I had said before, don't focus on trying to just end it, so to speak. Clearly, Canada's main demand of India is that it cooperate with the investigation. And it doesn't appear that India is keen to do that. But again, the focus should be on trying to convince both capitals to come up with the right incentive structure where they conclude that it's not in either of their interests to take new escalatory steps. And for instance, if India were to reduce security at Canadian diplomatic facilities in India, which of course, as you'll recall, that happened when the U.S. and when the India and the U.S. had their dispute a decade ago over the Khobragade affair. So that there's things that could be done that I think could really put the two countries in a position where it's really difficult to de-escalate.
Yeah.
But,
let me bring the diplomat into this conversation. Ambassador Puri, if there's any mediation, it's certainly not going to be accepted by India overtly. It will have to be back channel whispers, nudges, and so on. I don't see it going any other way. What do you think? I think it's going to get more aggressive till India softens at least.
Barkha, I don't know if you saw this article in the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, Tunku Vardarajan, who said some Canadian face will have to go for both sides to save face. I don't know about it. Look, I am generally of the view that a degree of this matter getting further escalated will happen before things get dialed down. But talking in terms of mediation, if we don't use this word in its formal sense, somebody coming, talking, arbitrating, no. But in terms of what countries do, and you don't need to be at the United Nations or anything else in that context. But I personally think that the country with the leverage is without doubt the country where Michael is based. And that is the country which would have the greatest interest in dialing down things. Now, how should things be dialed down? I don't know if I can say this on your channel, but let me say this. I am not such a great fan of bring out the evidence. Because, this drip kind of thing, or much more than that, and you can then trash the evidence after that. But,
exactly.
That seems to me perhaps the better way would be to, somehow or the other, get into the act, although immediately seems very difficult because the temperatures are extremely high.
So explain that, because so far the focus has always been has been mostly on where's the evidence. You're saying that's the slippery slope, because whatever he says, India is going to say rubbish, right? And now we know that Indian diplomats were under surveillance. There reverse stories of how unverified Trudeau refused to stay in a certain hotel room in the G20 because he thought he was under surveillance. The story today leaked in the Canadian media basically proves that Indians were under surveillance by the Canadians.
So, Barkha, we are in the real world. And I don't think that anybody thinks that these are not the ways in which countries and governments deal with each other. So let's leave that out of this particular picture altogether. My simple point on this evidence business is this, that, of course you will trash it. Of course, the other side will say it's the greatest and most credible evidence. And everybody knows it's perhaps here, not there. But it allows people to, come to their own sets of conclusions. Now, you will have to say, show the evidence. The gentleman will have to say, I can't, it's national security, this, that, which is not a bad idea. While other things happen in the back, real things happen in the back to try and say, keep up the rhetoric, but keep the real thing a bit down.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I actually find the whole show us the evidence, when will he show us the evidence, not a route that is going to actually lead to any kind of de-escalation. Before I give Rupa the last word, Avinash, if you can hear me, do go ahead with the point you were trying to make about questions being asked around the world in global capitals.
Yes, thank you, Barkha, and sorry for technology failing me for this time round. Look, the questions that are being asked, at least in London, which I've been asked since this crisis has kind of blowed over, is why is India in the kind of position that we have seen countries like China, Russia, Saudi Arabia in the past? I think that's a shock, because the question also comes from a source of the fact that people actually, there's a very positive view of India generally. So people are surprised. People are asking questions that you are an ally, you are a partner. Why would you do something of this sort? Even if we accept that, your position on the Russia-Ukraine war, people have come to accept that position as actually quite a bold balancing move. But the allegation that has been alleged by Justin Trudeau is of a whole different caliber. So there are reputational costs. And I think this is the kind of messaging that Ottawa is doing right now to Delhi, that, look, if you think you're going to go scot-free without any bruises, publicly speaking, diplomatically, that's not going to happen. And that's why Jake Sullivan's statement, a very cautious statement, but one where he's trying to balance different priorities, strategic priorities, is very important to note.
Well, I'm just going to give Rupa the last word with just a little sort of caveat of my own, that this is not how India, even across political affiliations, Indians who don't agree on anything, most Indians, I won't say there aren't exceptions, most Indians today agree on being irritated by Western hypocrisy, are irritated and galled by the complete absence of commentary on terrorism, a complete lack of understanding on what Khalistan is, what it's done to this country, Nishka to Indira Gandhi's assassination. And I think that's really galling to Indians. But the last word to you, in terms of who's going to face the reputational damage, where this is headed, and Ambassador Puri's very interesting point, show us the evidence isn't the route to de-escalation. Quick last word, Rupa.
Yeah, Barkha, I think we're in a very, very bad situation here. I as a person of Indian origin, I have strong ties to India, but I also love Canada. I'm caught in this, in the middle of this spat. A lot of just average people like me are wondering, what the future is going to look like. India has canceled visas for Canadians applying to go to India. That's not a good development. A lot of Canadians have families back in India. So if you're in an emergency situation, what do you do? So unfortunately, people have been caught up in this diplomatic spat. I think Mr. Trudeau needs to provide, work with India. India claims that Trudeau has not provided any evidence. At this point, we're lost in the fog of war. But I really hope that, the investigations, by the way, I mean, it's worth pointing out that the RCMP is still continuing investigations into this matter. So it's an ongoing investigation that has resulted in the expulsion of a diplomat, and then India responds with a tit-for-tat expulsion. So I just hope that we find a way where the two countries, work together, come to some kind of an arrangement where they get to the bottom of this, and actually figure out what exactly happened here. And it's also important that Canada realize that the Khalistan separatist issue is a serious national security threat to the Indian state. Canada certainly wouldn't entertain, wouldn't like the idea if FLQ separatists were given safe haven in India.
Absolutely.
And they would certainly have a thing or two to say about it. So there's got to be some understanding of each country's position here. India certainly, I abhor extrajudicial killings. Just for the record. So if India did in fact do this, I think it's quite concerning. I don't think I don't think India wants to be in that. Wants to be lumped in with the other unsavory countries. But having said that, Mr. Trudeau needs to work with his Indian allies and get to the bottom of this.
I do have to close, but Ambassador Puri, just a quick word to you. Visas have been cancelled, yes, but there's now talk of OCIs being next. You think that might happen?
I don't know, Barkha. I can't, second guess the government. But, look, one of the reasons would be that many people who are strident in their sort of support for such causes actually hold OCI cards because they're entitled to hold OCI cards. But, remember, you always have the right at immigration to send a person back, because anyone who's a foreign national, no matter if he has OCI or anything, doesn't have an automatic right to come to India. But having said this, look, I think the signaling from India has been very strong. I used the word last time that the ball has been lobbed back very forcefully. Let me use the word it's been smashed back to you. Now let's see what happens. I hope the rhetoric continues in whatever way, show the evidence, but real conversations among people who can influence these conversations take place, so that in a slight amount of time, we're able to do a little bit of dialing back. The relationship, I believe, at the level of people and otherwise is inherently important for the countries.
We leave it there. Thank you very much to Rupa, to Michael, to Avinash, and to Ambassador Puri, and to our audience. Thank you for watching. Coming up next is the forgotten story of Khalistan. We'll be talking in a few moments from now to someone who was a very, very young boy when he lost his entire family in that bombing. That is the forgotten headline from this Canada-India spat, and we'll bring it to you in about 15 minutes from now. So do tune back and see you soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.